In a sermon entitled The Shepherd's Flute, the great preacher Barbara Brown Taylor tells a story involving her husband Ed, who one day went duck hunting with his very, very, very good friend, spending the entirety of the day on Georgia's Flint River. The whole day spent together, sharing equally the pleasure of the experience, taking turns doing this and doing that. At day's end, cold and bone tired, they motored back to where they had put in and began the long work of moving everything from the boat into the truck. But coming back from one of the trips to the car, coming back to the water, they found that rather than secured on the shore, the boat had slipped into the water and was slowly beginning its movement downstream. With great haste, they ran along the river's edge, beating through the brush that overhung the river, hoping that at some point the boat would wend its way back into shore. No such luck. In fact, the further they ran, the further the boat got out into the river, until finally it began drifting into the river's main stream. Finally, Brown says, came the moment of truth. That moment when one of the two men, both of them cold and tired, would have to take a plunge into the river and guide the boat back into the shore. She says the two men looked at each other, but they both knew who was going to go. The one who owned the boat. And it was Ed's friend, not Ed, the owner of the boat, who ended up stripping off his camouflage coveralls and took the plunge into the chilly waters of the Flint River. Compare that story, if you will, with a movie that I watched just the other night. Not a good movie, by the way. But it involved thieves robbing armored cars. And in each case, when the guards were confronted by the thieves, they would, without a moment's hesitation, drop their guns and raise their hands, repeating each time the same mantra. It's not my money. I once heard somebody say this: if you want to know the difference between involvement and investment, consider a breakfast of eggs and ham. The chicken is involved. The pig is invested. So is the shepherd. A shepherd who moves from involvement to investment for the simple reason that the sheep are his. And belonging to him, he is responsible for their protection and well-being. See, when danger presents itself in the form of the wolf, it is the shepherd who takes the plunge. The difference between the hireling and the shepherd hinges on the possessive pronoun mine. And when it is your sheep, your boat, your money, you quickly find yourself all in. Shepherding is not something that can be done from a safe distance. David Lose, another fabulous preacher, longtime professor at Luther Seminary, now pastor of Mount Olivet Lutheran Church in Minneapolis, tells a story not involving him, but involving his friend, whose birth name was Franklin, but everybody simply knew him as Frank. Well, when he was just a boy, Frank and his sister fought incessantly. And I don't mean polite disagreements, I mean fights. And one day, in the midst of one of those fights, as Frank was sitting atop his sister, demanding that she say uncle, his mother walked into the room and she said, "Franklin, get off of her now." To which he responded with more courage than sense, "She's my sister and I can do what I want." Which brought his mother across the room. And looming large above him, she said, "She's my daughter and no, you can't." Ownership creates relationship, which moves the shepherd from involvement to investment, which has the shepherd all in for the good of the sheep. And while this talk of the Good Shepherd finds certain parallels in the other Gospels that we call the synoptics, for instance, the parable of the shepherd who goes in search of the one lost sheep, this talk of the Good Shepherd has so much more currency in the Gospel of John. That Gospel which begins like this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." See, at the center of the mystery of the incarnation, the Word made flesh, God revealed in Jesus, is the shepherd's heart. The God who, for the good of the sheep, takes the plunge, is all in on behalf of the beloved, the ones called and known by name. The God revealed in Jesus is the God who will go anywhere, risk anything and everything for the sheep. Just in case you didn't know it, abortion is back in the news, ready to further divide us as a country. And as I thought about that in the context of this text today, I realized that I do not have so much a position on abortion as I have something more demanding, more compelling, and ultimately far more gratifying. Rather than a position on abortion, I have a relationship with my daughter. Hannah is our youngest. And she and I had the opportunity to talk just the other day so that I might confirm what I assumed to be all the time. Hannah knew with complete certainty when she was a teen or a young adult that had she gotten unexpectedly pregnant, that under every circumstance, her mother and I would walk with her, doing anything and everything we could to help her carry that baby to term. We would walk with her from conception through gestation to delivery and all points thereafter, offering whatever resources we needed to offer practically, financially, residentially, because she is our daughter and we are all in. And Hannah also knew that if, for reasons of her own choosing, she decided to terminate that pregnancy, that same mother and father would walk with her through any crowd or any door so that she might safely get an abortion. I don't have a position on abortion. I have a relationship with my daughter. See, that's what being a parent is. That's what being a mother is. That's what being a father is. That's what being a shepherd is, and that is how God is. My ministerial colleague John and his wife Lois marched in Minneapolis' gay pride parade in a block of supportive parents. And as they did, John said it just broke his heart. Because as they marched along, they kept hearing the same thing from the crowd. Would you be our parents? Would you be my mom? Would you be my dad? I don't know if John and Lois had a position on LGBTQ rights, but what they had was more compelling. They had a relationship with their son. And when they came to that, John and Lois were all in. When it came to that, John and Lois were not just sheep, but they were those who follow in the way of the shepherd, doing as he did, taking the plunge, inviting the risk, protecting the beloved, guided by relationship, not just involved, but invested. See, that is our calling in relation to one another. That is our calling in relation to the church. Never standing on the banks, but ready to take the plunge. Like Jesus, who loving his own, loved them to the end. And if we'll do the same, we will find ourselves all in